Did you know that the life of Pontius Pilate, the man who authorized the crucifixion of Jesus, ended in a mysterious and tragic way? Imagine being responsible for a decision that marked history and then suffering the consequences in silence. Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, is a figure mentioned in several historical and religious sources. But what happened to him after that fateful day? His story combines biblical, historical, and traditional accounts. Pilate is mentioned in the 4 Gospels of the New Testament, where his hesitation and eventual decision to crucify Jesus are detailed. His interaction with Christ and the pressure from the Jewish authorities are described in Matthew 27, Mark 15, Luke 23, and John 18 and 19. In addition, sources such as the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus and the Roman philosopher Philo of Alexandria provide additional historical context for Pilate and his rule in Judea. Combining these sources helps us better understand the complex figure of Pilate and his role in the crucifixion. To fully understand his story, it is essential to explore not only the events narrated in the sacred texts, but also the political and social dynamics of his time. Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, was in a dilemma. The Jewish religious leaders were demanding the crucifixion of Jesus, accusing him of blasphemy. However, Pilate found no crime in Jesus, John 18:38. He tried several times to release Jesus, even suggesting the traditional release of a prisoner during the Passover. However, the crowd chose Barabbas over Jesus, Matthew 27:15-26. Although reluctant, Pilate gave in to the pressure of the crowd, symbolically washing his hands and handing Jesus over to be crucified, Matthew 27:24. This gesture was an attempt to exempt himself from responsibility for Jesus' death, an act that would become a symbol of cowardice and injustice. The biblical narrative also highlights that Pilate tried to appease the crowd in a number of ways, including scourging Jesus, hoping that a lighter punishment would be enough to satisfy the Jewish leaders, Luke 23:16. This moment not only sealed Jesus' fate, but also marked the beginning of the end for Pilate, whose actions would be analyzed and debated for centuries. Pilate was aware of the political instability in the region. Jerusalem was in turmoil due to the celebration of Passover, and the presence of Jesus, considered by many to be a prophet, only increased the attention. The religious leaders accused Jesus of inciting a revolt against Rome, Luke 23:2, a serious charge that could justify his sentence under Roman law. Pilate found himself in a difficult position. If he released Jesus, he could face a rebellion by the Jews, but if he condemned him, he would be authorizing the death of a man he considered innocent. To avoid a riot, Pilate gave in to the demands of the religious leaders, little knowing that this decision would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Bible does not give us details about Pilate's inner thoughts, but his actions indicate a man under immense pressure, trying to balance justice with maintaining public order. Subsequent history suggests that this choice would have weighed heavily on him. Historically, the role of maintaining order in provinces such as Judea required a delicate balance of power. Any sign of weakness could be exploited by Rome's enemies, putting Pilate in an extremely difficult position, where any decision had the potential to have serious political and social consequences. While Pilate was judging Jesus, his wife Claudia Procula had a disturbing dream. She sent a message to Pilate, asking him to have nothing to do with this righteous man, Matthew 27:19. This dream is mentioned only in the Gospel of Matthew, and its origin and meaning remain mysterious. Some interpreters believe it was a divine intervention trying to prevent Jesus' crucifixion. Claudia Procula appears briefly in the biblical accounts, but her intervention highlights Pilate's moral dilemma. She suffered greatly because of the dream, which she believed to be a divine warning, and ignoring it would be a mistake that would haunt Pilate forever. Later, Christian tradition sanctified Claudia Procula in some denominations. Reflecting on the importance of her role in the Passion drama, the figure of Claudia is interpreted by some as the symbol of conscience trying to intercede in moments of moral crisis. Her disturbing dream adds a supernatural dimension to the narrative, suggesting that higher powers were involved in the trial. Jesus was crucified on Pilate's orders, and the inscription on the cross read, "Jesus, the Nazarene King of the Jews," John 19:19. Written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, this announcement was an attempt by Pilate to vindicate the accusation that Jesus claimed to be a king, an act of treason against Caesar. While Jesus suffered, Pilate struggled with his own doubts and guilt. The crucifixion of Jesus, a central event in the Gospels, is described in great detail, including the reactions of various onlookers and the supernatural phenomena that accompanied it, such as the darkness at noon and the tearing of the temple veil. Matthew 27:45-51. These events weighed heavily on Pilate's conscience, as he witnessed events that suggested Jesus' divine innocence. The Bible suggests that the crucifixion was not just a human event, but also a cosmic moment of conflict between the forces of good and evil. Historically, crucifixion was reserved for the worst criminals and was intended to be a public spectacle of shame and suffering. Pilate's decision to go ahead with the execution, despite his reservations, shows the degree of pressure and complexity of the political and social situation in which he found himself. After the crucifixion, Pilate became obsessed with the decision he had made. Manipulated by the crowd and the religious leaders, it ate away at his soul. Jesus' words, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," Luke 23:34, echoed in his mind, and Pilate's guilt grew with each passing day, becoming unbearable. Although the Bible does not provide details about Pilate's later feelings, the psychological impact of his actions is a reasonable speculation, given the gravity of the decision he made. Christian tradition suggests that Pilate never overcame the weight of his responsibility for Jesus' death, a burden that profoundly affected his subsequent life. The apocryphal Gospels and other extra-canonical sources, such as the tradition of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, elaborate further on Pilate's anguish, portraying him as a man racked with guilt. His attempts to symbolically wash his hands of the Lord failed to alleviate the moral burden he carried, and he must have been constantly reminded of the events of that fateful day. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition even holds that Pilate converted to Christianity, acknowledging his guilt and seeking redemption, although this is largely speculative and not universally accepted. After Jesus' resurrection, the guards guarding the tomb reported that he had risen, Matthew 28:4-5. This caused great uproar among the Jewish leaders and Pilate, who attempted to suppress the truth by bribing the guards to spread a false version of events, Matthew 28:12-15. However, news of Jesus' resurrection spread quickly, increasing Pilate's torment. The resurrection is the central event of the Christian faith, strongly affirmed in the Gospels and the New Testament epistles, 1 Corinthians 15:3-8. For Pilate, the resurrection represented a crisis of legitimacy. If Jesus had indeed risen, it would not only validate his claims to divinity, but it would also mean that Pilate had condemned an innocent man to death. Pilate's attempt to cover up the resurrection reflects his struggle to maintain order and preserve his sanity in the face of events that defied Roman logic and authority. Furthermore, the spread of Christianity in the following decades, including the conversion of many Jews and Gentiles, amplified the impact of the resurrection and the implications of Pilate's decision. The efforts to suppress the truth about the resurrection reflected the continuing conflict between the temporal power of Rome and the emerging spiritual power of Christianity. Emperor Tiberius received conflicting reports about the events in Judea, and Pilate found himself in a precarious position, facing accusations. He was already unpopular due to his brutal repression and insensitivity to Jewish traditions, as reported by Flavius Josephus and Philo. Philo of Alexandria describes Pilate as a ruthless governor whose actions often angered the Jews. One of the most notorious episodes was when he used temple funds to build an aqueduct, which provoked a strong popular backlash. The situation worsened when Pilate was recalled to Rome to account for his actions. He was removed from office after an incident involving the slaughter of Samaritans on Mount Gerizim. This event, along with his administration, led to his replacement by Lucius Vitellius, governor of Syria. In Rome, Pilate faced a rigorous investigation and his political career was over. The political consequences of his actions in Judea had significant repercussions, both for himself and for the province he governed. The political turmoil during Pilate's rule and his subsequent downfall reflect the complexity of Roman administration in the provinces, where the maintenance of order and the imposition of Roman power often clashed with local traditions and aspirations for independence. In Rome, Pilate faced a rigorous investigation, and Tiberius was furious at the tensions he had caused in Judea. His wife Claudia continued to suffer from nightmares, while Pilate, consumed by guilt, lived in seclusion. Tradition suggests that Pilate did not face a formal trial, but was forced to withdraw from public life. Some apocryphal accounts, such as those of Pilate, offer alternative narratives of his life after the crucifixion, often with a tone of remorse and penitence. Pilate's death remains shrouded in mystery and speculation, with various traditions suggesting different endings to his life. Regardless, history paints a portrait of a man whose actions had a profound and lasting impact on both his life and history. The investigation in Rome likely focused on his failure to maintain peace and his mismanagement, reflecting the complex web of power and politics in the Roman Empire. Pilate, who once wielded great power, found himself helpless, living his final days in shame and isolation. A tragic irony for a man who sought to preserve his position through injustice. Pontius Pilate's death remains mysterious. Some historical accounts suggest that he committed suicide, unable to bear the weight of his actions and the humiliation of exile. The 4th century church historian Eusebius of Caesarea mentions that Pilate committed suicide during the reign of Caligula. Other accounts, such as those of Tacitus, do not provide specific details about his death. Christian tradition also presents several versions of his end, some suggesting that he converted to Christianity before his death. The legend, popularized in medieval and Renaissance literature, such as the Golden Legend, tells of Pilate committing suicide during his exile in Gaul, where his body was thrown into a river. In any case, his death was seen as a tragic outcome for a man who played a crucial role in the crucifixion of Jesus. The mix of history, tradition, and speculation surrounding his death reflects the complexity of his figure in the collective memory. Furthermore, Pilate's story has been used over the centuries to explore themes of guilt, redemption, and justice. If his suicide is true, it would be a final expression of despair and remorse. On the other hand, the traditions of his conversion suggest an attempt to seek absolution. These diverse narratives highlight the difficulty of separating fact from fiction when it comes to historical figures involved in events of great religious and moral significance. The figure of Pilate has become a dark legend in Christian history. He is often portrayed as a weak and manipulable man who lacked the courage to stand up for what he knew was right. His life and death are a reminder of the lasting impact of our decisions and the consequences of giving in to pressure. In the Gospels, Pilate is depicted as a governor who, while acknowledging Jesus' innocence, gave in to the demands of the crowd. Christian tradition has vilified him over the centuries, although some apocryphal texts offer a more sympathetic view of his figure. Pilate's hesitation and ultimate decision have been the subject of numerous interpretations. The figure of Pilate in theological and historical narratives highlights the moral and ethical complexity of his role in the crucifixion. The dark legend of Pilate serves as a warning about the dangers of giving in to external pressure at the expense of justice and truth. He is often compared to other historical figures who faced similar moral dilemmas, and his story is used to illustrate the importance of courage and integrity. In many Christian traditions, he is remembered during Holy Week as an example of how cowardice and injustice can result in devastating consequences. Pilate's tragic story also offers profound theological reflection. He stood before the Son of God but failed to recognize the truth. His failure to act justly serves as an example of human fallibility. Pilate's story challenges us to consider our own decisions and the courage it takes to follow the truth. Theologians over the centuries have debated Pilate's role in the Passion of Christ, often using his figure to illustrate the struggle between justice and expediency. His attempt to wash his hands of guilt is seen as a symbol of a guilty conscience trying to avoid responsibility. Pilate's figure is also used in sermons to highlight the need for moral courage and integrity. His story reminds us that when faced with difficult decisions, we must have the courage to act justly, even if it means facing personal consequences. Christian theology sees Pilate as an example of the struggle between good and evil, and his failure to know and act on Jesus' truth is a warning against moral complacency. Furthermore, Pilate's story invites us to self-reflection, encouraging us to examine our own hearts and seek to live according to principles of justice and truth. Pilate has become a central figure in many works of art and literature. His inner struggle and his role in the crucifixion of Jesus have been explored by artists and writers over the centuries. From medieval religious art to modern literature, Pilate has been portrayed in a variety of ways, reflecting changing perceptions over time. In works such as José Saramago's The Gospel, according to Jesus Christ, and Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita, Pilate is shown as a complex character, torn between duty and morality. In art, he is often depicted in the scene of Jesus' condemnation, with his expression varying from doubt to resignation. These cultural representations reflect Pilate's lasting impact on the collective imagination, highlighting his historical and theological importance. Pilate also appears in many depictions of the Stations of the Cross, where his figure serves as a point of reflection on power, justice, and humanity. Theatre and film also explore his figure, often emphasizing the moral dilemmas he faced. Pilate's complexity as a character allows artists and writers to address universal themes of power, responsibility, and redemption. In Christian tradition, Pilate is often remembered during Holy Week, with his figure being evoked in sermons and theatrical representations of the Passion of Christ. He is seen as an example of how cowardice and injustice can lead to devastating results. In liturgical rites, Pilate is mentioned in the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed, which states that Jesus suffered under Pontius Pilate. His inclusion in the creed highlights the importance of his role in the history of Christian salvation. The figure of Pilate is used pedagogically to teach about the dangers of injustice and lack of moral courage. During Easter celebrations, the memory of Pilate serves as a reminder of the consequences of human actions and the need to seek justice and truth in all circumstances. In many Christian traditions, the figure of Pilate is associated with the concept of unjust judgment, and his story is used to teach about the importance of justice and righteousness. Furthermore, in some liturgies, Pilate is mentioned in prayers as an example of human weakness and the need for divine grace to overcome our own shortcomings. Pilate's life and death teach valuable lessons about responsibility and integrity. Although he had the opportunity to change the course of history, he chose the easy way out. His story reminds us that our actions have consequences, not only for ourselves, but for all those affected by our decisions. The figure of Pilate is often used in educational and moral contexts to illustrate the importance of acting justly and courageously. His hesitation and eventual surrender to external pressures exemplifies how a lack of moral fortitude can result in disastrous decisions. Pilate's lessons resonate in many aspects of life, from politics to personal decisions, reminding us of the importance of remaining true to truth and justice. In many contexts, he is used as a case study to discuss ethics and leadership, highlighting the need for integrity in positions of power. His failings serve as a warning against complacency and taking the easy way out at the expense of what is morally right. Pilate's story challenges us to reflect on our own actions and the responsibility to act justly, even in the face of great pressure. Today, Pilate's story continues to resonate in a world of uncertainty and conflict. The importance of making just and courageous decisions has never been more relevant. Pilate's tragedy serves as a reminder that truth must prevail, even in the face of adversity. His figure is discussed in contemporary debates about leadership and ethics, highlighting the challenges of maintaining integrity in the face of political and social pressures. In times of crisis, Pilate's story is a warning about the dangers of colluding with injustice. Its continued relevance demonstrates the perennial importance of his lessons, which span time and culture. Furthermore, Pilate's story is frequently cited in debates about justice and human rights, illustrating how inaction can have devastating consequences. His figure is a constant reminder of the importance of moral courage and the need to stand up for the truth. Pilate's relevance in the modern world is a testament to the universal and timeless nature of the moral dilemmas he faced, encouraging us to seek justice and righteousness in our own lives. Pilate's figure has also been explored in popular culture, in films, plays, and books. He has been portrayed in a variety of ways, from a cold-blooded villain to a victim of circumstance. These portrayals continue to fuel the fascination with the man who played a pivotal role in human history. Films such as The Passion of the Christ and Jesus of Nazareth present Pilate in a complex way, highlighting his nuances. In literature, he is a central character in works that explore themes of power, justice, and remorse. Popular culture keeps the figure of Pilate alive, allowing for new interpretations and understandings of his role in history. These portrayals show how Pilate remains relevant and intriguing to modern audiences. In addition, he appears in numerous Easter theater productions around the world, where his role is examined and reimagined in a variety of ways. The different interpretations of Pilate in popular culture reflect shifts in social values and perceptions, highlighting how each generation reassesses his figure in light of new contexts and understandings. Pilate remains a central figure in discussions of power, morality, and the consequences of human actions, demonstrating his continued relevance in culture. The memory of Pilate lives on in Christian traditions and in the collective consciousness. His story is a testament to both human power and human frailty. He is remembered not only for what he did, but also for what he did not do, the courage to stand up for truth and justice. Pilate's inclusion in the Creed and the Passion narratives ensures that his figure remains central to Christian memory. His story is used in religious and educational contexts to teach about morality and responsibility, serving as a constant reminder of the challenges faced. Pilate symbolizes the challenge faced by those in positions of power, highlighting the importance of making just decisions. In many traditions, he is an example of how fear and cowardice can lead to morally flawed choices. His figure is also used to reflect on the nature of judgment and responsibility, highlighting the complexity of his decisions. Pilate's actions and subsequent condemnation of Jesus are analyzed not only from a historical perspective, but also as a study in ethics and leadership. Pilate's story serves as a reminder of the need to act with integrity and courage, reminding us that our actions have lasting consequences. The story of Pontius Pilate has a profound impact on the Christian faith, challenging us to reflect on the role we play in society and the responsibility we have in making decisions. Pilate is a tragic figure whose life and death continue to inspire and warn. Christian theology uses his figure to address themes of sin, redemption, and justice, with his role in the crucifixion of Jesus being central to understanding Christ's sacrifice and salvation. Pilate's lasting impact is a reflection of the importance of his actions and the lessons we can learn from his story. In addition, his figure is often used in educational contexts to teach the importance of responsibility and integrity. Pilate is an example of how power can corrupt and how a lack of moral courage can lead to disastrous decisions. His story challenges us to reflect on our own actions and the responsibility to act correctly, even in the face of great pressure. Pilate's impact on the Christian faith is profound, and his story is a constant reminder of the importance of seeking truth and justice in all situations, teaching us about the power of redemption and forgiveness. Pontius Pilate, the man who authorized the crucifixion of Jesus, is a complex and tragic figure. His story is marked by a mix of power and guilt, and as we reflect on his life and death, we are reminded of the importance of making righteous decisions and facing the truth, no matter how difficult it may be. Pilate's tragedy is a timeless reminder that our actions have consequences and that the pursuit of justice and truth should be our highest priority. His figure serves as a mirror to our own moral and ethical dilemmas, encouraging us to act with integrity and courage in all circumstances. Pilate's story challenges us to consider the responsibilities we have and the impact of our decisions, both in the present and in the future. It teaches us about the power of redemption and the importance of seeking the truth, no matter how difficult or unpopular that pursuit may be. Pilate is a figure who continues to resonate in our collective consciousness, reminding us that justice and truth must always be our highest priorities. As we reflect on Pilate's life and death, we are challenged to examine our own actions and the responsibility to act with justice and integrity, regardless of the pressures we may face.